What did a 7-year-old boy see while praying the rosary in the middle of a field that made his father, a man who hadn't prayed in 15 years, fall to his knees? A miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one expected. But before I tell you what happened in that field, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far the faith and miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Do you know that kind of silence that weighs more than any word? Thomas Brennan knew that silence well. 42 years old. The land had belonged to his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather. 150 acres of family history. And now, standing at the kitchen window on a July morning, all he could see was destruction. The wheat field was brown. What should have been golden and swaying in the wind was dry, 3 months without rain. The kind of situation that destroys decades of work in a matter of weeks. Thomas had tried everything until the money ran out, until the options ran out. The bank called again. Rachel's voice broke the silence. She walked into the kitchen holding the phone as if it burned her hand. Thomas didn't turn from the window. And 5 months. The words fell into the kitchen like lead. 5 months to pay what they owed, or lose everything. The farm, the house, the history of 4 generations. Thomas finally turned around. Rachel was leaning against the counter, her eyes red. 39 years old, married to him since she was 20, and he had never seen that look on her face. 5 months, he repeated. That's when he noticed Ethan. The boy was sitting at the kitchen table, his cereal turning to mush in the bowl. 7 years old. Blonde hair that Rachel always cut at home. Blue eyes now fixed on the plate. Children always listen, even when you think they aren't paying attention. Ethan, finish your breakfast. You'll miss the school bus, Rachel said, trying to make her voice sound normal. It didn't. Ethan pushed the bowl away. I'm not hungry. Thomas and Rachel exchanged a look, the look parents share when they realize they've failed to protect their child from something. The school bus honked outside. Ethan grabbed his backpack and left without another word. Thomas turned back to the window, staring at the ruined fields. I don't know what else to do, Rachel, he said softly. I've tried everything. Rachel stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. I know. 5 months, then we lose it all. Rachel didn't answer, because there was nothing to say. That night, Ethan lay in bed but couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the ticking of the clock, the wind against the glass. And then, crying. It came from his parents' room. It wasn't his mother. He had heard his mother cry before, when Grandma Margaret passed away 2 years ago. But this was different. It was his father. Ethan had never heard his father cry. The sound was muffled, but still there. Deep sobs that made Ethan's chest ache just to hear them. He lay back down, pulled the blanket up to his chin, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Then he remembered. Grandma Margaret, before she passed, when she was very sick, she had held Ethan's hand, placed the rosary in it, and said, When you need something, my love, pray the rosary to the Virgin Mary. She always listens to children. Ethan was 5 years old at the time. He didn't fully understand, but he remembered the words. The next day, Ethan came back from school, as usual. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. How was school? Good. Ethan went upstairs to his room, closed the door, walked to the dresser. In the bottom drawer, under the old T-shirts, was the box Grandma had given him. He opened it. Inside was the rosary, light blue, made of glass beads that sparkled when they caught the light. Grandma had prayed with it every day. This rosary is very special, Ethan, she had said. It was blessed when I was your age. It has been with me for many years. I want you to have it. Ethan picked up the rosary. The beads were cool and smooth between his small fingers. He put it in his pants pocket. Went down the stairs slowly. I'm going outside to play, he shouted toward the kitchen. Don't go far. I won't. Ethan went out and started walking. The farm had 150 acres. The house stood on a small rise, and from there you could see almost the entire stretch of the wheat fields, or what used to be wheat fields. Ethan walked straight toward the center. His sneakers kicked up dust from the dry soil. The sun was hot on his back. It took a few minutes to reach the middle, the farthest point from the house, farthest from the road. Just him and the dry wheat. He looked around. No one. Dad was in the barn, Mom in the kitchen. He knelt right there on the cracked ground, took the rosary from his pocket, and began to pray. He wasn't sure if he was doing it right. Grandma had tried to teach him, but he was little. Still, he remembered a few words. Hail Mary, full of grace. His voice came out low, almost a whisper. He passed the first bead between his fingers. The Lord is with thee. He kept going, stumbling over some words, making up others, but he continued. When he finished, he didn't know how much time had passed. The sun was lower. His legs were numb from kneeling. He stood up slowly, put the rosary away, looked around one last time, and went back home. Ethan returned the next day. Same time, same walk, knelt in the same spot, took out the rosary, prayed. This time it was easier. He remembered more words. When he finished, he went back home. In the kitchen, Rachel was preparing dinner, Thomas washing his hands at the sink. "Where were you?" Rachel asked. "Outside. Playing." "Playing what?" Ethan shrugged. "Just no walking." Thomas looked at him. "Out in the field?" "Yeah." "There's nothing out there to see, son." Ethan didn't answer. Third day. Ethan was getting better at praying. The words came out more naturally now. That's when Thomas saw him. From afar, right in the middle of the field, he saw a small figure. Ethan, kneeling. Thomas stopped, squinted his eyes against the sun. The boy was holding something in his hands. Head bowed, lips moving, Thomas stood there trying to understand. Then the wind shifted, and he heard it. Faintly, but he heard. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners." Ethan's small voice, praying. Something tightened in Thomas's chest. It squeezed so hard he had to place a hand over his heart. His 7-year-old son was kneeling in the middle of the ruined field, praying. Thomas turned and walked back to the barn before Ethan could see him. 7th day. Ethan was on the 2nd decade of the rosary when he felt it. Warmth. Not the warmth of the July sun. It was different, as if someone had placed hands on his shoulders, like Grandma's embrace, but more. Ethan stopped praying. He went completely still on his knees, holding the rosary. The warmth grew. It surrounded him completely. And there was something else. A fragrance. Roses. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. She was there, a few meters in front of him, standing. A woman, a blue dress flowing to the ground, as blue as the cloudless sky. A white veil covered her head and shoulders. A young face, dark eyes looking at him with tenderness. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly, not out of fear. He didn't feel fear. It was something else, something beyond words. The woman smiled at him, and in that smile, Ethan felt something he had never felt before. Peace. Complete peace, as if every weight simply no longer existed. The woman slowly raised her right hand over him and vanished. Not gradually, she was simply gone. But the scent of roses remained, strong, real, and the warmth on his shoulders lingered for a few seconds more before fading. Ethan stayed there on his knees, trembling, his heart pounding so hard, his sweaty hands gripping the rosary. What had just happened? He looked around, frightened, searching for the woman. But there was no one. Just him, alone in the middle of the field. Had it been real, or had he imagined it? But the scent of roses was still there, and that warmth on his shoulders. Ethan stood up quickly, put the rosary in his pocket with trembling hands, and ran back home. Ethan returned the next day. He wasn't sure he should. He was still scared of what he had seen, but something drew him back. He knelt in the same spot, took out the rosary, started to pray, slowly opened his eyes, afraid to see the woman again. But there was no one. He took a deep breath and kept praying, his heart still racing. Thomas couldn't get that image out of his head. Ethan kneeling in the field, praying. It had been days, and he hadn't said a word, not even to Rachel. But that afternoon, he decided to check. He waited until he was sure Ethan was home doing homework. Then he walked to the center of the field. When he got there, he stopped. The ground was different. Thomas knelt down, touched the soil. It was darker. Strange texture, and it was damp. Impossible. It hadn't rained. The irrigation wasn't working. He looked around. It was a perfect circle, about 3 meters in diameter. Inside the circle, the soil was dark, moist, with a different smell. The smell of living earth. Outside the circle, everything was the same. Dry. Cracked. Thomas sat there staring at it. It was in the center of that circle that Ethan knelt. He had seen the marks of his knees. "What's happening here?" he murmured. The wind blew, bringing a scent Thomas didn't expect. Roses. He froze, looked around quickly. There were no roses there, no flowers of any kind, but the scent was there, unmistakable. Thomas stood up fast, almost stumbling, and walked back home without looking back. 5 days later, Thomas returned. He couldn't stay away. He had to see. The circle was still there, the soil still damp, still dark. But now there was something else. Sprouts. Small, green, fragile. But there. Sprouting from the wheat that had been ruined for months. Thomas fell to his knees. Literally fell. He touched the sprouts with trembling fingers. They were real, alive, growing, only there, in that 3-meter circle, nowhere else, only where his son knelt every day to pray. Thomas covered his face with his hands, and for the second time in his adult life, he cried. That night at dinner, Thomas barely touched his food. Rachel noticed. "You okay?" "Just tired." Ethan was pushing peas from one side of the plate to the other. Thomas looked at his son. "Ethan!" The boy lifted his eyes. "You've been going to the field every day after school?" It wasn't a question. Ethan tensed. "I'm sorry." "You don't need to be sorry, just—" "Why?" Ethan looked at his mother, then at his father, then at his plate. "Because I heard you crying." A heavy silence fell over the table. Rachel dropped her fork. "Ethan," Thomas felt his throat tighten, "and Grandma Margaret said that when we need something, we pray the rosary to the Virgin Mary, that she always listens. So I took her rosary and started praying." Rachel covered her mouth. Tears began to fall. "Praying for what, son?" Thomas asked, his voice almost breaking. "For you and Mom, for the farm, so we don't lose our home." Thomas and Rachel looked at each other, a 7-year-old boy carrying the weight of the family's troubles. "And," Ethan hesitated, "and she came." "Who came?" Rachel asked gently. "The Virgin Mary." Ethan spoke so softly it was barely audible. "She appeared, right in front of me." Absolute silence. Thomas wanted not to believe, wanted to say it was imagination. But the damp soil, the sprouts, the scent of roses, the perfect circle where nothing should have been growing. "Son," Thomas said, "are you sure about what you saw?" Ethan lifted his eyes. "I'm sure, Dad. She was right there. Wearing a blue dress, she didn't say anything. She just smiled at me and did this." He raised his hand. "Then she disappeared. But I felt everything would be okay." A tear rolled down Thomas's cheek, then another. Rachel stood and hugged Ethan. "My love." Thomas rubbed his face, took a deep breath. "You, a child, have more faith than I do." Thomas rose from the table, walked to Ethan, and knelt before him. "Forgive me, son, for making you carry this alone." Ethan hugged his father. "I'm not alone, Dad. She's taking care of us." And Thomas wept. The next day was Saturday. At 4 in the afternoon, Ethan was getting ready to go to the field when Thomas appeared at the bedroom door. "Can I come with you?" Ethan smiled. "Of course, Dad." Rachel came too. The three of them walked together to the center of the field. When they reached the circle, Rachel gasped. "Thomas!" "What?" "I know," he said quietly. The sprouts had grown. They were already about 4 inches tall, green, vibrant, alive. Amid the devastation around them, that small circle was an explosion of life. Ethan knelt in the center, as always, took out the rosary. Thomas and Rachel knelt beside him. "I don't really remember how to pray," Thomas admitted. "I'll teach you," Ethan said. And there, in the middle of the ruined crops, under the hot sun, a family knelt and prayed together for the first time in 15 years. "Hail Mary, full of grace." Their voices intertwined, Ethan's clear and confident, Rachel's soft and tearful, Thomas's broken and awkward, but present. "The Lord is with thee." When they finished the rosary, they stayed there in silence. In the following weeks, something extraordinary began to happen. Rain came. Not much, not that torrential kind, but light, steady rain that came and went in irregular patterns, and the crops began to respond. Sprouts started to appear in other parts. The circle where the family prayed remained the strongest. The wheat there was already 1/2 meter tall, deep green, healthy in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Neighbors began to notice. "Thomas, your crops are growing?" Mr. Patterson asked one day. "Mine are still bad." "I know. I can't explain it." Patterson scratched his head. "Strange." 3 months after that first day of prayer, the harvest came. It wasn't abundant, far from it. Out of 150 acres, only about 40 produced anything. But those 40 acres produced wheat of exceptional quality. Thomas took samples to 3 different buyers. All of them offered a premium price. "This wheat is perfect," one buyer said. "What nutrients did you use?" "None. I couldn't afford fertilizer this year." The man looked at him in disbelief. Impossible. This level of quality without fertilization, it just doesn't happen. But it had happened. When Thomas added everything up, the harvest, the premium prices, the low costs, it was enough to pay off the most urgent bank debts. Not all of them, but enough for the bank to agree to extend the deadline for another year. The farm was saved. Months after that first day of prayer, it was spring, a new planting season beginning. Thomas, Rachel, and Ethan stood in the center of the field, in the circle where everything had begun. The wheat there had been harvested, but the ground still looked different, darker, richer, as if something fundamental had changed in that soil. "Dad," Ethan said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, son." "She never came back after that first time." "Why do you think that is?" Thomas thought. He had thought a lot about that over the past few months. "I think she didn't need to. She showed you that she was listening, that she was watching over us. After that, all we had to do was keep believing." "And do you believe?" Thomas looked around, at the fields beginning to turn green again, at the house on the horizon that was still theirs, at his wife beside him, and at the son who had saved them all. "I do, son. For the first time in years, I truly believe." Grandma would be happy. She would. Thomas hugged Ethan. Rachel joined the embrace. The 3 of them stood there for a long moment. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan looked at the blue rosary in his hands. "And I learned something too." "What's that?" Ethan looked at the rosary, then at his father. That sometimes the best way to fight is to kneel. Thomas felt tears in his eyes again, but this time they were good tears. "When you grow up," he said, "you'll be a better farmer than I ever was, because you learned something I forgot. You learned that some things we don't control, we just trust. Because some things in this world don't need explanation, they only need faith. And look, if you made it this far, to the end of Ethan's story and the Brennan farm, do one thing for me. Write in the comments, Blue Rosary. The rosary that a 7-year-old boy used to save his family. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read Blue Rosary in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue to bless and protect you and your family. Amen.